Hello, everyone, and Shavua Tov. Welcome to Mishna Mondays. We're going to study a little Mishna today, but I want to give you a little bit of a heads up of our plans for the summer. And most importantly, and most excitingly, I'm thrilled that the summer's heading in, and I'm going to take some vacation. I'm teaching some other classes. July 4th is coming. Lots of schedule kind of. And so I was thinking about how, to kind of maybe put this on pause when Yonatan suggested, or Yonatan and I got in a conversation about the potential of some teaching that might take place at this hour from some other scholars. In particular, Yonatan and Hannah, a couple of our young scholars. I think I'm just old enough to call them young scholars. Yonatan and Hannah are going to be generously and brilliantly and excitingly, as I said, teaching the next two sessions. So we're going to, this will be the last straight Mishna class until we pick up after a break. But it's not the last of these Monday sessions. We're going to have two more. Next week, Yonatan is going to teach the class. And then the week after, Hannah Jensen, who's also here, is going to teach the class, so that there's still some learning here on Mondays. And then I think then it'll be July 4th and then vacations. And I think we're going to close up shop for about a month before we resume the Mishnah class. So that's word to the wise. Next week, show up for one of the reasons I'm doing this, just to be totally transparent, is that I'm teaching an intensive summer course at AJR, the rabbinical school. So it's just the next couple of weeks, it's going to be a lot for me to also be teaching these classes. And I thought, oh, maybe this is the right time to shut them down for the summer. And then Yonatan and Hannah stepped up in this beautiful way, and I'm really excited to learn from them. So I hope you are too, and we'll come next week for those classes. Okay, let's say a blessing and get into our learning today. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, so today, if this were the last Mishnah class you were ever to take, you'd be in luck, because we're going to look today at one of the most important Mishnayot. One of the, I don't know, if you were only going to learn one Mishnah, maybe this would be, maybe you'd learn this Mishnah, because there's such core Jewish knowledge in this Mishnah. And that's one of the reasons that we're studying the Mishnah, is that, as I've suggested many times, it's the best text for just sort of getting that nuts and bolts, hardcore Jewish knowledge. This is like the code of Jewish knowledge. And we've been studying Masechet Shabbat, the tractate that discusses the laws of Shabbat, and seeing some interesting discussions. We've been so far looking at the prohibition of carrying on Shabbat. But today we're going to really burst the conversation wide open, because the big question hovering over this Masechet, this tractate, Shabbat, is really one of the big questions that one must ask simply reading the text of the Torah and seeing what it says about Shabbat. And by that I mean that we are told to keep the Sabbath, Shemoret HaShabbat, to observe the Sabbath. And if I were to ask, well, what does that mean, to observe the Sabbath? You might answer, well, we don't do work on the Sabbath. In Shabbat, we don't do work on Shabbat. Okay, so don't do work on Shabbat. And then, of course, the question is, well, what do you mean? What does it mean not to do work on Shabbat? What does it mean? What don't we do on Shabbat? Many ways to answer that question, right? We could answer that by saying, well, just whatever you do for a living, don't do that on Shabbat. Some people have that practice. We could answer the question by saying, make sure you're very calm and relaxed on Shabbat. Just make sure everything is no strenuous exertion on Shabbat. But many of you already know that the answer that is given, we're going to explore today, is given in the form of this list, this list of 39 prohibited categories of labor on Shabbat. Okay, so the rabbis have an answer for it. What don't you do on Shabbat? These 39 things. Okay, so we're going to spend some time trying to figure out why these 39 things, some of you probably already have a sense of where they came up with them, but we're going to really go deep, I hope, today. We have a lot of work to do today, so let's hope let's get right into it. But there are 39 categories of forbidden labor, and this Mishnah, this one Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat is, oh gosh, I forget how many chapters long, but it's 20-something chapters long. It's one of the longest volumes of the Mishnah and then of the Talmud. And we started at the top, and it takes them 7 chapters to finally say, oh, we should tell you what all of the forbidden labors are on Shabbat. And then in chapter 7, Mishnah 2, we suddenly get the avot melacha. Avot is a word you may be familiar to you. We often translate avot as patriarchs or ancestors or fathers. And here it's going to be used a little more conceptually, like the father categories or the parent categories. Okay, so avot melacha are the primary categories of labor on Shabbat. And without talking too much more, I want to just go through them, and we're gonna really try and see how the rabbis got there. But before we do, I just want to look at them and think about the categories themselves and why these are the categories, what they might represent, just as a list. Okay, before we do all of the midrashic work, all of the interpretive work to make all the connections that the rabbis are suggesting we make. Okay, so let's just take a look at the list now of the 39 categories of Shabbat and just analyze the list. Just think about why this list. Okay, so here is a source sheet for you all. And let's take a look now. Mishnah 7, chapter 7, Mishnah 2. Okay, here we go. The primary categories of labor are 40 minus 1. Avot melacha arba'im chaser echad. Okay, that already, now I want us to but as I said, we're just gonna look at this Mishnah and think about this Mishnah before we get the backstory. And one of the things we could ask right at the outset is 40 minus 1. Why 40 minus? Why put it that way? It's just a helpful way of remembering 39. There are 39, but it's 40 minus 1. So why 40 minus 1? Okay, so that's a question. I'm throwing that into the mix. But now let's take a look at the categories themselves, okay? Now, I have already done some of the work for us, so I'm sort of like cheating just in the way that I've spaced them into paragraphs, because I'm going to ask you to look for what are some of the general areas of work that this Mishnah seems to be suggesting, and I've kind of suggested some of those already by giving us paragraphs. If this were a test, I would have asked you to do the breaking it up yourself, but we can continue. My divisions might not be the only ones. We can continue to break these into subcategories. So let's take a look. What are the categories of labor here? One who sows, hazoreah, who plants seeds, and one who plows, and one who reaps, and one who gathers, and the word here is amer, so it's gathering like omer bundles, little sheaves into a pile, and one who threshes, and one who winnows, and one who removes the inedible. Now that's hard to understand. It's like sort of a clumsy translation, but the word is borer, which becomes a big confusing category. You spend in yeshiva when you study Shabbat, borer takes you like most of the time because very, very hard not to do borer. But borer means selecting, taking things out that don't belong. Like you have a bunch of grain and there are rocks in it. This is the classic example. So taking the rocks out, that's forbidden. And one who grinds, and one who sifts the flour into a sieve, and one who kneads dough. These the bold is the text of the Mishnah, and the unbolded is just like clarifying what that is, and one who bakes. One who, and by the way, these suggestions that I'm making for paragraphs, they're not random, because you can even see in the text that there are vavs here. The vav suggests it's like the grinder and the sifter and the kneader and the baker, and then there's no vav here, so it's almost like a new sentence is begun. So we could that's one way to analyze the Mishnah for those of you following in the Hebrew. Okay, so new sentence: one who shears wool, and one who whitens it, and one who combs the fleece and straightens it, and one who dyes it, and one who spins the wool, and one who stretches the thread of the warp in the loom, and one who constructs two meshes, tying the threads of the warp to the base of the loom. I'm using the translation. I'm already beyond my knowledge of weaving work, okay? Like, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. What does it mean to tie the threads of the warp to the base of the loom? Maybe some of you know, I don't. And one who weaves two threads. And I say that, by the way, I want to just say, part of the reason that I'm saying I'm beyond my knowledge here is because it's a funny thing. We have this system of prohibited labors on Shabbat. I don't even really know what they all are, you know, and I'm a rabbi. Like, wait, what does it mean to do the two threads thing? Like, some of them seem so far, so far in the past, so outside of the context of my relevant life that I'm not even sure what these 39 primary ways of observing Shabbat are. So that's part of the dilemma. All right, let's just continue. And then I want to hear what you think the categories are. Let's see. And one who severs two threads, and one who ties a knot, and one who unties a knot, and one who sews two stitches, as well as one who tears a fabric in order to sew two stitches. Is this crazy? I mean, this is like one of the 10 commandments. And now we're learning that the way that you observe this commandment is to make sure that you don't tear a fabric in order to sew two stitches. Okay, and here's some more. And one who traps a deer, and one who slaughters it, and one who flays it, and one who salts its hide, which is a step in the tanning process, and one who tans its hide, and one who smooths it, and one who cuts it into parts. One who writes two letters, and one who erases in order to write two letters. Hakotev shtei otiot, v'hamochek al manat lichtov shtei otiot. One who builds, that's a huge category. One who builds, that's a huge category. And one who dismantles, one who tears down. One who extinguishes a fire, and one who kindles a fire. One who strikes a blow with a hammer, that is hamakev apatish, is usually understood to mean the one who nails in the last nail, finishing something on Shabbat. And one who carries an object from domain to domain. Oh, there's the one we've been discussing now for 6 chapters. The carrying of an object from domain to domain, which is to say, these are the primary categories of later. They're 40 minus 1, which is to say, each one of those 39 categories could be discussed for chapter after chapter. We could try to figure out what exactly it means to carry. And that's part of what we're saying when we say these are primary or avot melacha, which is these are large categories that define general activities that are forbidden. Now we have to figure out what are the toldot, what are the children of those parents, meaning, just want to explain this one last piece and then I'll open it up, meaning it's forbidden to plow on Shabbat. So what does that mean? So it means don't take your plow into the field. But the rabbis say, well, that's the primary category, but there are other ways to essentially do that labor. And one of them would be to drag a bench across a dirt floor, just to move it. Now, that's not a primary category of labor, but in dragging the bench across the dirt floor, you will have basically been plowing the floor. Okay? So that gives you a sense of how the rabbis begin to work with these primary categories and fashion an entire scheme, an entire intense system of Shabbat observance, which, some of you will be familiar with, but we probably all know that there are levels of stricture, and you can take this all very seriously and suddenly have all kinds of questions about how you can observe Shabbat. One of my favorite examples is sifting, we said, taking the rocks out. You're not supposed to take rocks out of wheat. Well, one of the discussions in Jewish law is whether you can take socks out of the sock drawer that you don't want to wear as you look for the socks that you do want to wear. Because isn't that essentially the same action? Now, if some of you are beginning to roll your eyes now, that's quite welcome. That's part of the strangeness that I want you to feel and encounter as we enter into this system. But now let's pause, kind of take a step back and look at this list. And I would like to invite folks to give me some sense of what's going on in this list. What are the things which are forbidden? Why are these 39 things chosen? And what categories do you see here? Right? There are 39 categories, but what general areas of prohibition are you seeing in this list? And so that we can begin to think, why are these things forbidden? Okay, Matt will start us off.
I'm seeing a great big overriding category of changing the world. That sowing and reaping is growing, so we can't grow things. We can't build stuff, and building is in several places. It's cloth, and even sorting is, because of a notion of holiness, sorting is a changing of the world. So I'm seeing all of this. The world is at its best. Leave it there.
Okay, great. That's excellent. So Matt notices that this is all kind of like manipulating our physical reality in order to transform it. Great. That's very well put. And I might just add the language that we rabbis often use to describe Shabbat is that we say that what is forbidden on Shabbat is not labor, but creative labor. Right? In other words, it is not forbidden to lift a boulder up on Shabbat and place it down. Well, you can't carry it into the public space, but just in your house, you take a heavy object and you lift it up. Even though that's exertion is not the issue. It's closer to what Matt is saying, which is some labor that creates a new thing, transforms the world. Great. Other categories that folks are seeing? Anyone want to offer other readings of our Mishnah so far? Let me put it back on the screen. I see, Marianka.
I see, at least in the first three categories, that it has to do with food production or providing food and providing, I think, shelter was there. So that's also in terms of Shabbat, that you don't have to worry about it. It's a special time. You don't need to occupy yourself with these things. It's given, right?
Good, excellent, Marianka, excellent. That's right. Marianka sees some major categories here, right? That we call these the primary categories, but this is like the primary. What are the big categories? Marianka sees. And I'm going to add one thing to what Marianka said. Marianka said,
sorry, I think rightly, it was clothing.
That's right. That's what I was going to add. Yep. So Marianka sees it all, which is that this whole paragraph has something to do with making food. And in particular, it seems to be making bread. That's the example they're using. Okay. So all of the labors that it would take to make food or bread. Here is all of the labors that it might take to make clothing. In particular, in this case, wool clothing. Okay, it's interesting. There are sort of like particular examples that are used, like wool, but it seems like they're being used to construct larger categories, like just sewing and putting clothes together. And then finally, this category here of getting leather, hides, right, to capturing an animal to get its leather, is for a stronger fabric, a fabric that one might use, for example, for a tent or for shelter. So that's great. Marianka's seen for us that we can lump a lot of those first categories into the things that you need to do to make food, to make clothing, and to make shelter. And that's, oh my gosh, look at Hannah and Yonatan's screen. Hanale. Oh my gosh, how cute, how cute. Okay, sorry, I got distracted. And that's already important information. Like, before we even get into the derivation of all this, that what Marianka has said gives us a deep insight into Shabbat. It builds on what Matt was saying, which is that and I think you were suggesting this at the end, Marianka, we shouldn't be scurrying around to provide for our most basic needs, food, clothing, shelter. Those things should already be in place when we arrive at Shabbat. Great. Now we're, after, looking at this, what's seemingly random list, now we're in some real, now we're we've gotten somewhere. Okay, let's keep building. Yonatan?
Thanks for indulging my distraction with Hannah. Now, I want to speak to the question you asked earlier about why 40 minus 1 and not 39. And there's one other case where the rabbis do this, that at least that comes to mind, which is that the Torah says in punishment for a crime, you can give 40 lashes, and the rabbis say, actually, you can give 40 minus 1, right? And I can't think that this is disconnected. This may be a bit obscure, but I think this is a commentary on punishment, right? That violation of Shabbat is supposed to be a capital offense. And I think in both cases, what they're doing is they're saying, actually, like, the rabbis really don't like punishment, right? They really, really don't like this idea. And they go, well, maybe like don't, like maybe don't execute people for violating the Sabbath, and maybe don't give people the maximum number of lashes that the Torah allows. Like, let's just chill out for a bit. I think is what's going on with the 40 minus 1.
Okay, great. That's great. So very keen, as always, keen reading, Yonatan, and very good pull there. That's an important reference. And Yonatan's right. Let me just explain it again a little bit, but I want to say one kind of larger context point, which is that, okay, so we're going to put a pause on the labors themselves. We'll come back to where they got this. But Yonatan takes us back to that first question, why 40 minus 1? Now, let's just start by saying that 40 is a big number in our tradition, right? 40 days and 40 nights with the flood, 40 days on Mount Sinai. 40 is a big number, and it seems to mean, the fullness of something, of the whole, a complete chapter, a complete time period, a complete unit of something. And so, not surprising in some ways that the rabbis would be playing with the number 40. And then Yonatan says, but the idea of 40 minus 1 has some other we see this pop up in the tradition in other places, and specifically Yonatan says it is the 40 minus 1 is the amount of lashes that you would get for a crime, the Torah says is 40, but the rabbis say what the Torah really means is not 40, which is to say, Yonatan is suggesting to us that 40 minus 1 symbolizes a little bit of let's remember that we don't want to punish people. We don't want to take things. Let's not get crazy here. Let's back off a little bit from the. So I don't know exactly how to read this into Shabbat, except that Yonatan reminds us Shabbat is also an observance that whose transgression is punishable by death. So maybe the rabbis are signaling, yeah, there's a whole system of Shabbat, but okay, maybe there's just a note of let's not get crazy with this stuff, right? Okay, so that's good, that's helpful. But now let me come back to the labors themselves. And here I want to get into the big question, which is why are these the categories? Where are we getting these categories from? And some of you probably know the official answer, but we've already come up with some other answers, some just ways of reading the Mishnah. Marianka gives us a very good answer. Matt gives us a very good answer, right? Something's going on here that has to do with changing the world, and something's going on here that has to do with changing the world in order to provide for my basic needs, okay? But now, why these things? Where did we get these particular categories of labor? Anybody know? There's a technical answer. Anybody know what the technical answer is? Where From whence do the rabbis derive the categories of labor? I'm
Building
hearing Hannah.
the Mishkan.
Oh, Hannah, please louder.
Building the Mishkan.
Okay. Building the Mishkan is correct. Do you want to elaborate on that at all? Or are you just giving me what I need? I appreciate that. Okay, that's correct. See, Hannah's like a young scholar. we're gonna hear from her in a couple weeks. Appreciate that. Right. So that's the answer. That's the technical answer. In other words, the rabbi, to return to our initial question, the rabbis wonder, as we might wonder, wait, how do you observe Shabbat? What does it mean to not do labor? And the way that the rabbis answer questions is that they find their answers in the text of the Torah itself. They come up with what's called a midrash. Midrash literally means seeking. So they're seeking an answer in the text. So they're going to interpret the text in such a way that it tells you a secret you wouldn't have known. And the secret is, exactly as Hannah has heard the secret before, which is that the labors that are forbidden on Shabbat are those labors which were required to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the portable temple in the desert. Whatever you needed to build that tabernacle, those are the forbidden labors. Now, what? Why? Who cares about the tabernacle? What's the connection? Okay, here's the connection, and then I want to know what you think of this. But here's the core. This is, I said, core Jewish knowledge. So core Jewish knowledge that there are 39 categories, but also core Jewish knowledge where we got them from. And here's the answer. We got them from the rabbi's reading of Exodus chapter 35. And here's how it goes. In Exodus chapter 35, Moses gathers the whole Israelite community, gathers them together. This is towards the end of the book of Exodus, and the building of the tabernacle has begun. The last 5 parshot of the book of Exodus all deal with the building of the tabernacle, and it's begun. And Moses says, these are the things that the Eternal has commanded you to do. And you'll soon see that what he's going to command them to do is to bring all this stuff into the tabernacle. Look down here. Take among you gifts to the Eternal. Everyone whose heart so moves him shall bring them. All these things that you use to build the tabernacle. But wait a minute. Before Moses starts telling the people what they need to do to build the tabernacle, strangely and kind of out of nowhere, he mentions Shabbat. Moses says, these are the things the Eternal has commanded you to do. On 6 days, work may be done, but on the 7th day, you shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Eternal. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death, as Yonatan reminded us. You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on the Sabbath day. Okay, so Moses suddenly talking about Shabbat, and then all of a sudden, oh, Moses is done talking about Shabbat and back to the tabernacle. Moses said further to the whole community of Israelites, this is what the Eternal has commanded. Take from among you gifts. I just read this, and you can see now, look at all of these things. Tanned ram skins. Now, remember we were just talking about tanning animal hides. Well, you'll need tanned ram skins for the tabernacle. So here you go. Here are all the things you can't do. Here's the 39 labors. And how did we know that these are the things? Because the rabbis say, Moses gathered the people. Why is this section here? Why is Moses gathering the people together to tell them about Shabbat all of a sudden? Well, because we've been told that the people should make a sanctuary, but we had no idea that you could only make it during the weekday and not on Shabbat. It is therefore written, and Moses gathered them on the weekday and not on Shabbat, meaning Moses says specifically, he gathers them and he says, you can work for 6 days. On the 7th day, don't work. Here's an example of the kind of thing that you do on 6 days. But here now, switching to the tabernacle, are really all of the categories that you can do on 6 days. And so you can't do them on the 7th day. Okay? Now, all that's very technical, but I hope you understand the move that's been made. The rabbis say that Shabbat is mentioned juxtaposed, mentioned right up against the work of the tabernacle in order to communicate to you, to wink at you and communicate to you that the work of the tabernacle is the work that you're not supposed to be doing on Shabbat. Okay, now I want to know, do you buy it? What do you think of that move? Is that a legitimate form of reading? Why are the rabbis doing it? What do you think of that? I mean, in some ways, very elegant, right? The rabbis found a place, Shabbat, and then the tabernacle. You see what they're doing. So what do you think of that kind of classic rabbinic move? But in this case, they're going to construct an entire realm of Shabbat from that little quick interpretive move. So I'd like to know, do you buy it? Does this seem like a legitimate form of interpretation? And if not, like, what do you think is going on here? Why are the rabbis doing this? Okay, so let's open up the room again. What do you think? One way to ask the question differently is to say, how would you have constructed Shabbat? What do you think we are not supposed to have done on Shabbat? And if you were trying to figure it out, might you have suggested the tabernacle? Does this make sense to you? All right, Matt, what do you think?
The way I hear your question, and I hear it this way, because this is always the question I ask, which is, what were they thinking when they wrote the document? What were the people who were writing the Torah? And again, whether that's God or somebody else doesn't matter for this question. Did they put that passage in there to tell us what to do on Shabbat? And yeah, I buy it in this case. I do buy it. Oh, really? Yeah.
Okay.
I'm rather shocked. And I also feel that if this were my thesis topic for, my doctoral thesis in rabbinic studies, it would be a legitimate thesis topic. It feels like a great, big, enormous question that I'm giving you my first answer. And my answer right now is yes, I buy it. That passage is in there to tell us about Shabbat.
Oh my gosh, I can retire. I've done my work. Matt Silverstein, biblical critic, is accepting the rabbinic interpretation, thinks that is the correct reading of the Torah. And Matt makes the question stronger than the one I was asking, because part of what I'm asking is, what are the rabbis thinking, right? What are the authors of the Mishna thinking when they put this together? But Matt is asking the higher question, what is the Torah thinking? Could the Torah be possibly thinking, have the rabbis found what the Torah was trying to tell us? And Matt buys it. Oh my gosh. Unbelievable. We're gonna have Matt enrolled in Orthodox yeshiva by the end of the year. But okay, let's continue asking both of Matt's questions. What are the rabbis thinking doing? And do you think they have a good reading of the Torah? In other words, what is the Torah thinking doing? Okay, Yonatan.
Yeah, I mean, let's remember also that these rabbis are writing out of an unbroken tradition, right? That they lived in a society that was Sabbath observant. They were Sabbath observant. So that coming into this text, they already knew exactly what they were going to permit and prohibit, right? They may frame the proof texts some way or another, but it wasn't like there was some labor that they were doing on Shabbat and were going to prohibit, or the other way around, right? So in that regard, I think the substance of it is unambiguously correct. I mean, they were preserving the tradition as it existed. And as far as like framing it within the context of the tabernacle, I don't know why, but I'm sure there was like some greater symbolism behind it.
Okay, that's wonderful. So Yonatan is being gentle here, but suggests, I think, the possibility of a different kind of reading. Because Yonatan says, and I think wisely, rabbis obviously have some concept of Shabbat that already exists. They're already observing Shabbat. And they're telling you what they know, which is, this is how you observe Shabbat. They're not just like coming up with this out of nowhere. Here's the gentle part. Yonatan is saying, and so yeah, maybe that's how, well, did they get those 39 categories from the tabernacle? Or I hear in that description another possibility. This is more like the answer I expected from Matt, but Matt's very frum today. But the answer I expected from Matt is they had those 39 categories. They exist for a different reason, maybe Marianka's reason, which is that, you know, just don't do the things you basically need to do on Shabbat to take care of yourself. Do that before Shabbat. And they've got those categories and they're thinking like, but it doesn't say that in the Torah. How do we make it say that in the Torah? Or how do we find that in the Torah? Right? So different theories of what the rabbis are up to. And one version of that, Matt is convinced today, is that the rabbis are like, yeah, it's obvious. Look at this passage. It's so clear the way that we derive these laws. And another version is the rabbis are kind of, well, we know we got these 39 categories. How do we find them, right? That would be a different approach. All right, let's hear from, I see some new hands up. Joe.
I think also the construction of the Mishkan is by far the most detailed, elaborate, and comprehensive description of all kinds of work in the entire Torah. That it covers every possible way you could work, at least at that point in time, pretty much. Certainly more than anywhere else, because it just goes on and on for so much of the book of Exodus. So that would be a good place to find every possible kind of work somebody could do, and thus would not be allowed to do on Shabbat.
Good. Very nice, Joe. And everybody's getting frum today, which means that frum, like, you know, super pious today. But the reason I'm joking about that is because part of what we're seeing here is that when you first look at the idea that keeping Shabbat means all of these 39 things, it just seems crazy. Come on, you're just making this stuff up. And yet the truth is, and maybe the reason that this system has endured, it's actually a fairly sophisticated interpretive move. And Joe gives us more reason to find it plausible, which is that it's crazy how much the Torah details the construction of the tabernacle. It takes four entire parshot. Every year we read it and we think, oh my gosh, this is so boring. This is still going. What's going on here? So one reason that we now have to think that the Torah has given us all of these details is because actually what the Torah is giving us is not just the Mishkan, this portable temple that eventually we wouldn't use anymore anyway, but no, this is the template for Shabbat, one of our most enduring institutions. So that's whoa, the Torah starts to seem like, wow, it really knows what it's doing here. So that's nice. Florine?
I can understand the logic of the 39 prohibitions, but what I feel is something missing. And it bothers me, and I start to think of a poem I would write about it. I think that there's a purpose for resting, that it's not just to rest from labor. I think Shabbat has a elevation purpose, and one can only elevate when one has all the other clutter out of his or her life. And so I would like to see a positive approach to why Shabbat, and what can come out of respecting Shabbat, being with your family, praying. I mean, I want to move it to a different perspective.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's a great, deep and a great question. Let me answer. Let me like give a couple of just initial answers, and then let's stay tuned, because I think Florine, we're gonna by the end we're gonna come to a description of Shabbat that I think will be quite satisfying to you. But Florine is asking an important question just about our whole experience of Shabbat, and certainly as we see it through the lens of these rabbinic constructions, these laws, which is that it's so much about restriction. It's so much about not doing. It's so much about forbidden. It's so much like and Shabbat can feel that way. Shabbat can come to feel like, oh my gosh, did I violate? Oop, I did my. And at that, and I've, when one is first experimenting with Shabbat, especially Shabbat observance, it can start to feel like suffocating. There's so many laws. What I have to worry about, what socks I take out of my drawer. And then at a certain point, you start to feel like, wait, what is Shabbat for here? It's just a cage of law. There's something that doesn't feel quite right about that. Now, I say a little bit of an initial answer. We do know that Shabbat is sometimes spoken of as observe the Sabbath and sometimes spoken of as Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, remember the Sabbath. And we often use that remember and observe to mean like the things you don't do and then the things that you do. Remember the Sabbath, make Kiddush, be with your family. But that doesn't feel like very present here in this catalog of no's. So let's keep Florine's question in the air. And as I said, I will circle back around to an interpretation I think that a poet like Florine will have appreciation for. Let's hear from Alexandra and then Marianka.
So I'm not an earth scientist, but I'm pretty sure it's hard to find dolphins in the desert. And so it makes me think like all the instructions for the Mishkan that come from God are about, let me show you people that I'm going to give you all these miracles. I'm going to give you these impossible instructions. And I'm going to help you fulfill them. I'm going to hand you the dolphin skins. I'm going to make them appear in some way or another. So you have all of the tools that you need to follow these very strange and very specific instructions. And so perhaps, but still you have to like tan the dolphin skin. You have to dye the cloth red or whatever. But so maybe the model is based on the Mishkan and maybe this also speaks to Florine's point, the idea that the world that we are in is given to us by God. It's miracles, it's filled with miracles. And for 6 days out of the week, we have to take all these gifts and all these miracles from God and perfect them because we're humans and we're builders. But on the seventh day, we let God fulfill the miracles. Like we've done our part and God like fulfills the miracles in every sense. We don't need to work to sustain ourselves. We are sustained fully through God. And it's not a joint partnership in terms of our effort, but now it's a joint partnership purely in terms of our spirituality and ability to receive and partner with the energy of those miracles. That's great. I like that. What Alexandra's doing for us is thinking about, tabernacle, the construction of the tabernacle in particular. Like, what does it mean to build a tabernacle? Well, it's work, it's labor, but it's holy work. And Alexandra builds on that and says, and maybe we even have God's assistance in that work. But on some level, it's holy, sacred work. And that speaks to the work that we do during the week. It's important. Like the 6 days of labor are sacred. That's also a part of our tradition. But on the Sabbath, we do move into this space where God will provide. That's the lesson of the manna. That's the lesson of the resting from the work of the tabernacle, which was already imbued with sanctity. But now we step back and just let God do. Okay, good. I'm gonna go out of order here because I saw a new hand, Jen Snow.
I wonder if I'm missing something because to me it seemed fairly simple, which means of course I'm probably missing something, but that if the building of the Mishkan is seen as one of the ultimate acts of like holy human creation, work, and labor in the service of worshiping God, then the fact that the 39 prohibitions would have come from there and are in relation to stopping work and resting, it just all made sense to me in that sense.
Wait. You're saying it doesn't make sense to you or it does make sense to you?
No, it does make sense. I'm wondering, like it made so much sense that I'm wondering if I'm missing something. Like to me, it just seemed like, I don't want to use the word obvious, but to me, it seemed that if building the Mishkan is literally human labor and creation and work in the service of God, then the fact that those 39, I don't want to say steps, but those 39 things became the prohibitions about stopping work for Shabbat. So stopping work and resting coming directly as the antithesis of creation and work.
Yeah. Okay, great. So this is really like the wonderful experience for me as a bearer of this tradition, professional bearer of this tradition, that as I present this model, which at first seems so strange and arbitrary, the more we reflect on it, the more it starts to seem almost, says Jen, almost obvious, almost intuitive. And Joe's helped us do some of that work as well. We've been constructing since Matt this understanding of how elegant the rabbi's interpretation is. Let me give you like really. I'm going to do some of this work as well and try and convince you what a great interpretive move this is. And just to add to our conversation, that part of what the rabbis are playing with is the word melacha, the word work, labor, which is used, as some of you have already noted, but let's just see it in the text. The word for work, we've been talking about throughout the tabernacle. The Eternal spoke to Moses, "See, I have singled out by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. I've endowed him with the divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft." What word do you think they use for craft? Melacha. Right? See it again, to work in every kind of craft, melacha. And here are the crafts, the way that you build the temple. Now, not only is the Sabbath mentioned where we saw it in chapter 35, it's mentioned again and again throughout the description of the tabernacle with the same language. 6 days may work be done. Whoever does work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. But now let me give you the, what do you call it? The coup de, the last, the final blow. What is it? Coup de grace? Just to again state the obvious, the first mention of the Sabbath in chapter 2 of Genesis ends by saying that the heaven and the earth were finished in all their array. And on the seventh day, God finished the work. Vayachal Elohim b'yom hashvi melachto, that God had been doing. And God ceased on the seventh day from all the melachto, and God ceased from all the melachto of creation. So same language there from the very start that ends up becoming central language in the construction of the tabernacle. And not only that, but they keep mentioning Shabbat as they mention the tabernacle. Now it's starting to seem like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed it. Of course, this is the understand. This is clearly why the Mishkan is there and why the link has been made. And it's, the brilliance of the Torah. It's from God. We can all go home believers, right? All right, but I'm sure we can't just leave it there. Let's continue to pick at it and probe a little bit. I'm going to turn to Andrea.
So I've been kind of sitting on a question that probably was more relevant 20 minutes ago, but why? There's a lot of work described in building the temple. Why go to the Mishkan? Why not go to the something more permanent and more, I don't know, they may have even known people when they wrote this that lived in the time, the temple, or at least, their grandparents. Why the Mishkan?
It's a great question. And we do have elaborate descriptions of how the temple was built. The Mishkan's this portable thing. It's a temporary thing. And you might ask other questions like, why the tabernacle anyway? Like, aren't there other kinds of labor that we might have thought about? Why did we go directly to the tabernacle? And I think the answer gives us an insight into the way the rabbis felt that law had to be constructed, which is that it has to come from the 5 books of Moses. It has to come from the Torah. And there simply wasn't a temple built yet. So they have to use something in the Torah, because one of the operative interpretive principles in rabbinic law is that law comes from the 5 books of Moses. Once you get into the books of the prophets and Joshua, you can have nice things, inspiring ethics, but that's not where our law comes from. It simply would not be legitimate to say, well, we derive all the laws from what it says in the book of Kings when Solomon built the temple, because the book of Kings doesn't have the level of sanctity and kind of direct contact to God that would imbue it with a sense of binding obligation. Okay, so it's an important question, and there's a kind of almost technical answer to it. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Hannah Jensen, what do you think?
I just have a little thought, which is probably related to what Jen was saying, I think, but I don't think it matters if I believe that this is a good link or not, because I think that at the end of the day, if Shabbat is really it for us, which it is, I think it's really what, at least for me, I come back to in my Judaism all the time, then I need to understand the importance of that. And I need to understand the weight of that, and how better to understand that than to think of it as actual service to God in the way that they were actually physically constructing a way to access God. And so whether or not I think that the 39 malachot directly came from that, and that was the intention from the outset, I don't know that I care, because if that brings me back to the seriousness with which I should take Shabbat, then it's done its job. And I just don't know that the rest of that matters so much.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate that comment, because we're looking at one of the classic rabbinic kind of interpretive moves, so it is worth asking, so what do you think of this move? Where'd they get it? How convincing is it? And Hannah says, I don't know. I mean, this is the move. Oh, is this really what the Torah meant or not? I don't know, but it's serving its purpose. And having said that, I want to think a little bit about what is the purpose. Let's not necessarily, let's just imagine that the rabbis decide, whichever way we understand this interpretive move, what is the significance? What is the importance of saying that we build a tabernacle 6 days a week, and on the seventh day we refrain from building the tabernacle and we rest? It's Shabbat, right? And we're just with God, as Hannah described it. What is the significance of that? What does that mean? I'm going to take one last new voice, Allison Goldman.
Hey, so I wonder if it might have something to do with, like, Judaism is not an easy religion, not an easy practice. We've talked about this. It takes a lot of work to kind of like engage in Jewish practice and try to be close to God in the way that we want to be. And I wonder if it's almost like when you're swimming, there are times when you're swimming, when you're actually putting the work in, and then there are times where you're sort of gliding. And I wonder if it's a little bit like that, like building the Mishkan. It's not like, that's not the work of farming. It's actually not the work of sustenance. It's the work of building closeness with God. It's sort of like spiritually oriented work.
Good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm cutting you off.
No, that's sort of what that's where I was.
Great. So these last couple of comments now begin to take us into some deep theological speculation here. Given this move, given this connection, what exactly is going on here in suggesting that Shabbat is like you building the tabernacle, you're building the tabernacle all week, and then you stop building the tabernacle and you're just with God in Shabbat. And I want to say something here that I think is the natural extension of our conversation. Maybe some of you have thought it already, but remember that the link here that we just saw is that the same word, melacha, that is used in Shabbat is used in the tabernacle, and that word goes all the way back to the beginning, right? To the very first Shabbat. So think about what that means here. And I'm not saying anything new. Other people, other smarter people have said this before me. But essentially, what we're looking at is that God creates a world. God creates a world. And then God rests from the world and is just there, just is there. That's the original Shabbat. So similarly, why do we make a tabernacle? What are we doing? Why is that? We create a tabernacle in order to create a little world that God can exist in. And then when we're done, we rest and we're simply with God, right? Same, that's like inverse movement. God creates a world for us and then rests. we create a space for God and then rest. And so in a sense, using the tabernacle is just like taking us back to the first Shabbat and saying, yeah, the whole world is a tabernacle. The creation of the world is the creation of our tabernacle. So just as God rested from creating, so too we will rest from creating. And when God rests from creating, God just hangs out with us there in the Garden of Eden. So will we, when we rest from creating, just hang out with God in this paradise called Shabbat. Okay, so that's like, that I think is the end of that theological speculation, and to me, very exciting. I want to, though, end our class. I promised Florine that I would give an interpretation of all of this, these laws, these restrictive nature of these laws. Like, what is it all about? And here, I want to turn to another great poet in our tradition, Abraham Joshua Heschel, who famously called Shabbat a palace in time. And I was thinking about that phrase, a palace in time, because it's another kind of building language, construction language. So look at the way that Abraham Joshua Heschel describes this palace in time and how it is that this palace in time is built. We'll end with this quote from Heschel. Take a look. It's just so beautiful. Okay, he says, labor is a craft. This is from the book The Sabbath, which is a thin volume that I recommend to you all. Labor is a craft, but perfect rest is an art. It is the result of an accord of body, mind, and imagination. To attain a degree of excellence in art, one must accept its discipline. One must adjure slothfulness. The seventh day is a palace in time which we build. It is made of soul, of joy, and reticence. In its atmosphere, a discipline is a reminder of adjacency to eternity. Indeed, the splendor of the day is expressed in terms of abstentions, just as the mystery of God is more adequately conveyed in via negationis, in the categories of negative theology, which claims that we can never say what he is, we can only say what he is not. We often feel how poor the edifice would be if it were built exclusively of our rituals and deeds, which are so awkward and often so obtrusive. How else express glory in the presence of the eternity, if not by the silence of abstaining from noisy acts? These restrictions utter songs to those who know how to stay at a palace with a queen. Just read that last line again. These restrictions utter songs to those who know how to stay at a palace with a queen. So that's Heschel's version, and a little bit of an answer to Florine's question earlier, is that just as we build actively during the week, so we build passively on Shabbat. Our abstention, our restriction, our not doing is a form of constructing an invisible palace, a palace in time. And I couldn't say it any better than that. That's just perfect. So we'll leave on that note. Thanks, everybody.